I walked in on them. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. I had a meeting canceled last minute and thought, hey, maybe I'll surprise them with lunch. I even grabbed tacos from that food truck down the street, his favorite. Stupid me. The second I opened the door, I felt it. The silence was too heavy. The air too still. Then I heard it. A laugh. Her laugh. Coming from my bedroom. I don't remember dropping the bag. I don't remember how I got down the hallway. But I'll never forget what I saw when I pushed that door open. My husband. On top of my best friend. Naked. Sweaty. Laughing. They didn't see me right away. They were too busy. Too deep in their betrayal. I stood there frozen. My brain refused to believe it. My heart? It shattered into a million pieces before I could even say a word. And when they finally noticed me, it was like time stopped. Her smile vanished. His face turned white. No one moved. No one spoke. Until I did. Are you serious? That's all I could manage. My voice was shaking. I was shaking. But deep inside, something else was building a rage. Pure, blinding rage. He scrambled off her like a coward. She pulled the sheet over herself like that could cover what she'd done. Babe, he started. Don't. Just don't. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I refused to give them that. How long? I asked. Neither of them answered. How long? She spoke first. It was a mistake. Wrong answer. I laughed. A dry, ugly sound. A mistake? That's what you call it. I looked at her, my best friend since high school. The one who held my hand during my mom's funeral. The one I trusted with everything. And she was in my bed. With my husband. I left without another word. But this was just the beginning. Because the truth? It went deeper than I ever imagined. I drove for hours that day, not knowing where I was going, not caring. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls from him, texts from her. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands were trembling on the wheel, my face burning with betrayal. It felt like my whole life had imploded in a single second. Every memory we'd built, 10 years of marriage, vacations, late-night talks, the mortgage we were still paying, suddenly meant nothing. And her? My so-called best friend? We'd been inseparable since we were 17. College roommates. Bridesmaid at each other's weddings. She knew everything about me, my fears, my past, my dreams. And she used all of it to crawl into my husband's bed behind my back. Eventually, I pulled into an old gas station and just sat there, staring blankly at the steering wheel. It was almost dark. I didn't even know what state I was in. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not to that house. Not to them. So I checked into the first motel I found. It was grimy and reeked of bleach, but I didn't care. I collapsed on the bed fully dressed and stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying that moment over and over in my mind like some sick movie on loop. The next morning, reality began to creep in like a slow, poisonous fog. I needed answers. I needed to understand. I still couldn't grasp how this had happened. So I finally looked at my phone. 23 missed calls from Derek. 11 from Leah. I skipped all of those. But then I saw something that stopped my heart. A voicemail from 3 weeks ago. From Leah. Hey, girl, she'd said, her voice chipper. Just wanted to see if you were free for drinks Saturday. Derek said he was gonna be out of town for work, so I thought maybe we could have a girls' night. Miss you. I remembered that night. I'd been sick, bad migraine, and told her I'd have to pass. I stayed home in bed. So he wasn't out of town? The pieces clicked together like dominoes in my brain, falling fast and loud. They'd planned this. Or maybe not planned, but at the very least covered for each other. Which meant this wasn't the first time. It was premeditated. Intentional. And suddenly, I knew I needed more than just answers. I needed the truth. The whole truth. And I would tear my life apart to find it. The next day, I went back. Not home. I couldn't call the place home anymore, but to my sister's apartment in the city. She'd always told me Derek was too charming for his own good. I'd laughed it off, thinking she was just being protective. But as I sat on her worn-out couch, holding a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to sip, I realized she'd seen something I didn't. Or maybe refused to. I told her everything. Every sordid, disgusting detail. She didn't say, I told you so. She just held my hand while I finally cried. And when the tears dried up, I told her I was going to confront them, both of them. Not for closure. For war. I started with Leah. I didn't text. I didn't call. I showed up at her job. She was working at a boutique downtown, the same one I helped her get hired at 3 years ago when she'd been laid off. I walked in, and the second she saw me, she froze. Her smile dropped like a mask slipping off a face. We need to talk, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. It scared even me. She stammered something about being busy, about not being able to leave her post, but I wasn't asking. I was telling. We went outside, around the corner where no customers could see. And for the first time in my life, I saw Leah not as my best friend, but as a stranger wearing her skin. How long? I asked again. This time she didn't dodge. Maybe she knew there was no point anymore. 7 months, she whispered. 7 months. 7 months of lying. Of hugging me while she slept with my husband. Of Sunday brunches and book clubs and pretending nothing was happening. I felt something inside me die right there on that sidewalk. She tried to explain, to spin some story about how it started as a mistake, how she never meant to fall for him, how they didn't plan it. But every word sounded like nails on a chalkboard. She talked like she was the victim, like they were the ones torn apart by impossible choices. I could barely breathe. I didn't yell. I didn't slap her. I didn't cry. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You're dead to me." Then I walked away. But I wasn't done. It was Derek's turn next. And I wasn't going to play nice. I waited until nightfall to confront Derek. Not because I was scared, but because I knew he'd be home, alone, vulnerable, out of his element without her. I didn't want to give him the comfort of daylight. I wanted him to sit in the dark with what he'd done. The house looked the same from the outside, like nothing had changed. But I knew better. That house, our so-called sanctuary, was tainted now. Every room held secrets. Every wall had heard lies. As I walked up the driveway, my hands were steady, but my heart pounded like a war drum. I wasn't the same woman who left 2 days ago. Something in me had hardened. He opened the door the moment I knocked, as if he'd been waiting. His eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn. For a split second, I saw the man I once loved, confused, broken, lost. But then I remembered that this face, this body, this person had chosen her over me. Again and again. "I want answers," I said. "No, hi. No, can we talk?" Just those 3 words. He stepped aside wordlessly and let me in. The living room looked untouched. My throw blanket still on the couch. A picture of us from our honeymoon still on the shelf. I wanted to scream at the sight of it, but I sat down instead. He sat across from me, leaned forward, elbows on knees like a man at confession. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he began, his voice low and brittle. "At first, it was just texting. Joking around. You were always busy, and don't you dare blame me," I snapped. The heat in my voice silenced him. "I gave you everything, Derek. Everything. And when I was working late, trying to keep us afloat, you were what? Sexting my best friend?" He had the audacity to look ashamed. Good. He should have been. He told me it started at Leah's birthday party. I'd been sick, holed up in bed again, and he stayed late to help her clean up. She got drunk. They talked. 1 kiss. That's all it took to unravel a decade of marriage. I asked if he loved her. He hesitated. That hesitation hurt worse than a slap. "I don't know," he said. "It's not like that. It's different." Different. He used that word like it meant anything. Like different somehow made it okay. I asked if it was over. He said yes, swore it ended the moment I caught them. I didn't believe him. Not for a second. Because betrayal like that? It doesn't just end with one exposed lie. It runs deeper. Like mold. Like rot. I told him I was filing for divorce. He didn't beg. He didn't fight. He just nodded. And that broke me more than anything else. Because if he didn't fight for us after all the damage, then maybe I'd been alone in this marriage far longer than I realized. I walked out with nothing but my purse and my pride. I didn't look back. But the worst part? The betrayal wasn't even over yet. Because what I found next would change everything I thought I knew. I spent the next few days in a fog, crashing on my sister's couch, eating nothing but toast and rage. I thought I'd hit the bottom. I thought walking in on my husband and best friend was the worst kind of hell a person could experience. But I was wrong. Because pain doesn't just come from what people do, it comes from what they hide. And what Derek and Leah hid from me. That was the real knife in the back. It happened on a Thursday. I was scrolling through my email, trying to cancel some shared subscriptions, mentally preparing to talk to a divorce lawyer. That's when I saw it, an email notification from our shared cloud account. One I'd completely forgotten we had. We used it to store documents, receipts, and sometimes photos. My heart skipped. Something told me to check it. I logged in and there it was, a folder I hadn't seen before. Hidden inside another folder labeled Car Warranty Docs. Subtle. I clicked it. Inside, dozens of photos. Videos. Of them. Not just in bed. Not just naked. But laughing. Kissing. Holding hands in places I'd never even been. A beach trip I never knew about. A cabin with a fireplace I'd never seen. Leah wearing my scarf. Derek in a t-shirt I bought him for our anniversary. They hadn't just screwed around. They'd had a full-blown, secret relationship. Like a second life. And the worst part wasn't the sex. It wasn't even the intimacy. It was the joy on their faces. Real, raw joy, like they weren't cheating, like they weren't destroying me. Like I'd never even existed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I just stared frozen, watching the world I thought I knew crumble pixel by pixel. And then I saw it, one last file. A video. Dated just 2 weeks before I caught them. I clicked. It was Leah. Lying in my bed. Wearing my robe. Talking to Derek, who wasn't on camera. And she said the words that finally broke whatever was left of my heart. She'll never find out. And even if she does, she'll forgive you. She always does. They counted on me forgiving him. They expected it. Like my loyalty was something to exploit. Like my love was just a weakness to weaponize. That was the moment I stopped grieving. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done. I was going to burn it all down. Not out of vengeance, but for survival. And it started with exposing them both for who they really were. The next morning I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even shake. I felt cold, numb, precise, like a scalpel in a surgeon's hand. For the first time since everything shattered, I had clarity. I knew what I needed to do, and I didn't hesitate. I backed up the entire folder, the photos, the videos, every disgusting, gut-wrenching piece of evidence. I uploaded it all to a private drive. And then, with hands steadier than they had any right to be, I started crafting the perfect message. No threats. No rage. Just facts. Because nothing screams louder than the truth delivered in silence. I sent the files to Leah's boyfriend first, Mark. A sweet, oblivious guy I'd known for years. He worked in finance, commuted to Manhattan every day, brought Leah flowers on Wednesdays just because. I used to envy their relationship. Now I pitied it. I composed a short, simple email. You deserve to know who you're really with. I'm sorry. Attached were 6 select photos and 1 video clip, just enough to prove the depth of the betrayal without drowning him in it. Within 10 minutes, he replied with 1 word, thanks. Within an hour, his Facebook was wiped clean of her. Relationship status, single. Next was Leah's boss. Why? Because I'd helped her get that job by vouching for her character. She'd used me as a reference. And guess what the company prided itself on? Integrity. I sent them a polite message with time-stamped footage of her getting intimate in the store bathroom with my husband, footage I found later when I checked their old security system out of pure morbid curiosity. I didn't hear back from the company. But her LinkedIn went currently employed to open to work overnight. Derek was trickier. He was a sales director at a mid-sized tech firm. Cocky, polished, image-conscious. I knew one thing about his company: they had a strict policy about personal conduct, especially with public-facing employees. I made no move against his job. I didn't have to. I simply emailed his boss a Dropbox link with no message at all. Let the images speak. Let them decide what kind of man they had leading their teams. No fingerprints. No trail. Just consequences. But that wasn't the end. Because the final piece? The final revenge? That was personal. And it had to be face-to-face. Because I needed Derek and Leah to see what they'd done. I needed to look them in the eyes one last time and show them that the woman they tried to destroy was still standing. Stronger than ever. And ready to bury the past on her own damn terms. I arranged the meeting like it was business. 1 message to Derek. 1 message to Leah. Same place, same time, the coffee shop where we used to meet every Sunday before grocery runs and lazy afternoons. Neutral territory. Public enough to keep things civil. Personal enough to make them uncomfortable. I sat at the corner table early, sipping on a black coffee I didn't taste, watching the door like a hawk. Derek arrived first, looking haggard, thinner, like the guilt was eating him alive. I didn't flinch. He sat across from me without a word, his eyes darting nervously, trying to read mine. There was nothing left to read. Then Leah walked in, and for a moment she looked like she might turn around and bolt. But she didn't. She walked over, sat beside Derek, and folded her hands in her lap like a child awaiting punishment. I didn't greet them. I didn't smile. I laid a manila envelope on the table between us. This, I said, tapping it once, is every piece of evidence I've collected. Screenshots. Emails. GPS logs. Videos. Photos. Conversations I recorded once I knew. It's all here? Leah paled. Derek swallowed hard. I'm not giving this to a lawyer, I continued. I'm not taking you to court. Not unless you make me. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. You will sign the divorce papers. No alimony. No shared assets. I keep the house. The car. Everything. You walk away with your job if you still have it and your dignity, what little is left of it. That's the deal. And if I say no, he muttered. I leaned in slightly. Then I go public. I leak this to your HR department. To your friends. Your family. Your church. Everyone. You think I won't, but you forget who I am. I kept your secrets for 10 years. I know exactly where to hit you. He said nothing. Just looked down at the table, defeated. I turned to Leah next. You owe me nothing legally, so I'm not asking. But I'm telling you, if you ever contact me again, if I even see you near me, I'll release everything. Don't test me. Her voice was small. I didn't mean it. Don't finish that sentence, I snapped. You meant to. You had a choice. Every time. For 7 months. You chose him over me. You chose yourself. So now I'm choosing me. There was a silence that stretched too long, too heavy. But I let it hang there. I wanted them to feel it. To sit in it. Finally, I stood up. I looked them both in the eyes. This is goodbye. And I walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I wasn't walking away in pain. I was walking away in power. But what happened after that? That was the part that surprised even me. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. My life began to rebuild itself, not in big, dramatic ways, but in quiet, deliberate steps. The divorce papers were signed within days. Derek didn't fight. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he knew that even trying would only make things worse for him. I had my lawyer review the documents 3 times just to be sure. When it was official, I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no big night out. I just sat in my living room now, and breathed in the silence like oxygen. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the start of it. Leah tried to reach out once more. She sent a letter. Handwritten. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. The envelope is still in a drawer, unopened, right beneath the lease agreement for the new office space I rented. Because yes, something else happened during that time. I took every bit of the pain, the betrayal, and the rage, and I funneled it into something that was mine alone. A business idea I'd shelved years ago because now isn't the time, or Derek doesn't think it'll work. Well, Derek's opinion didn't matter anymore. And suddenly I had all the time in the world. I started small, freelance consulting, helping local boutiques with branding and customer strategy. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every invoice I sent, every late-night strategy call, every contract I negotiated was a middle finger to the life they tried to break. I didn't just survive their betrayal. I thrived in spite of it. But the journey wasn't linear. Healing never is. There were days I woke up and couldn't breathe. Days I saw a photo of us from 3 years ago and collapsed in tears on the floor. Grief is a strange animal, it comes in waves. Some days it roars. Some days it just lingers in the corners, quiet but ever-present. I learned to let it be. To feel it, honor it, and then put it back where it belongs, behind me. I made new friends. Real ones. Women who didn't flinch when I talked about betrayal. Women who'd lived through worse and still got up every day with fire in their eyes. We met through a support group, the kind I used to mock. Yeah? Those women were my army. They taught me how to laugh again. How to trust again. Slowly. Carefully. But surely. And one day, months after the dust had settled, I ran into Derek. At the grocery store, of all places. He looked lost. Not just in the aisle, but in life. His shirt wrinkled. Hair unkempt. That spark, the arrogant shine in his eyes, it was gone. We locked eyes for a brief second. He opened his mouth to say something. I smiled gently and walked right past him. That was the closure I never thought I'd get. Not from his apology, but from my freedom. What I didn't expect, though, was what came next. Because healing gave me clarity. And clarity revealed a secret I never saw coming. One that would change everything again. It happened by accident, like most life-altering revelations do. I was cleaning out the storage unit Derek and I had rented years ago. It was time to cut all the leftover ties, and this felt like the final thread. The place was filled with junk, boxes of outdated electronics, furniture we never used, old photo albums I couldn't bring myself to open. And then I saw it, a black, plastic bin labeled tax docs/misc. I almost didn't open it. I almost left it there, assuming it was nothing but old receipts and shredded dreams. But something made me pause. Maybe intuition. Maybe spite. I popped the lid. Inside, beneath a stack of dusty manila folders, was a small, leather-bound notebook. I recognized it immediately. Derek's handwriting. He used to scribble ideas in it, business goals, budgets, sometimes even notes from our therapy sessions. I flipped it open, expecting to find scribbles about his next sales pitch. What I found instead was a journal. Not just any journal. A record. Of them. There were dates. Locations. Entries. Thoughts. He wrote about her like she was the light at the end of some dark, tortured tunnel. About how I didn't understand him anymore. How Leah saw the real him. He fantasized about leaving me but didn't want to be the bad guy. Said it would be easier if I left him first. She's my safe place, he wrote on one page. But I don't want to blow everything up. Not yet. Not until I'm sure she'll be there after. I nearly dropped the notebook. My hands went cold. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated. He didn't fall into an affair. He built a strategy around it. He weighed the pros and cons of my heartbreak like it was a business deal. And Leah? She knew. He wrote about how she was getting tired of sneaking around and starting to push for more. But the most gutting line of all was scrawled at the bottom of a page marked just 3 weeks before I caught them. If she finds out, I'll tell her it was meaningless. She'll cry. Maybe scream. But she'll stay. She always stays. That was the moment I realized he never feared losing me. He counted on my loyalty as a shield. He used my forgiveness as a strategy. And that shattered whatever pieces of the past I'd still been trying to preserve. I wasn't just betrayed. I was played. Manipulated. Controlled by a man who knew exactly how to make me bend without breaking. But he made one fatal mistake. He assumed I would always come back. He never imagined I'd rise instead. The journal became my last trophy. Not of love, but of survival. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I kept it. To remind myself of who he was. And who I never ever wanted to be again. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because life had one more twist for me. One I never saw coming. It started with a knock. Not a message. Not a call. A real knock on my door just as the sun was setting and the air outside turned that soft, golden kind of quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd been working from home that day, still in sweats, my hair up, laptop open beside a half-eaten bag of trail mix. When I opened the door, my heart stuttered. It was Mark, Leah's ex. I hadn't seen him since I sent that email all those months ago. I assumed he hated me or at the very least wanted no further contact. But there he was, neat as ever, though his eyes looked older, sadder. And in his hand a familiar envelope. The same one Leah had sent me weeks earlier. The one I never opened. She sent one to me too, he said, holding it up. I didn't read it either. I thought maybe you'd want to do it together. I stared at him. Speechless. Why now? Why me? But something about the way he stood open, vulnerable, holding his pain with quiet strength made me nod. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. 2 people shattered by the same 2 traitors, both clinging to our last frayed threads of dignity. We opened the letters at the same time. Mine started the way I expected. I never meant to hurt you. Clichés. Excuses. Emotional manipulation masked as remorse. But buried in the mess, there was something else, something that made me go cold. She mentioned a trip. A weekend in Vermont. She said it was the first time they'd almost got caught. That they had to lie to cover up the pregnancy scare. Pregnancy. Scare. The words echoed like gunshots. I looked up at Mark. He was pale. Reading the same line in his letter. We locked eyes. My breath hitched. She thought she was pregnant, he whispered. I nodded slowly. But that was 3 months before we broke up. She told me she wanted to wait a bit before trying. That she wasn't ready. She told me we should start trying, I said, my voice flat. Around that same time. She encouraged me to. And there it was. The full, nauseating weight of it. She was playing both of us. Calculating. Manipulating. Testing the waters of motherhood with one while planning a future with the other. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was psychological warfare. Mark sat back in his chair, exhaling hard. We were both pawns. Not anymore, I replied. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't pain. I felt power. Mark and I talked for hours that night. Not about revenge. Not about what-ifs. But about healing. About how trauma, when shared, doesn't just multiply, it also transforms. We weren't victims anymore. We were survivors. And our stories, no matter how broken, deserved a new chapter. Together, maybe? But even alone, I knew I'd never be the same woman again. Because the worst was over. And the best? It was finally beginning. After that night, something shifted in me. It wasn't love, I wasn't ready for that, and neither was Mark. But it was a connection, a raw and honest kind that didn't need pretending. We understood each other without explanation. The silences weren't awkward. The pain wasn't hidden. There was no pressure to move on, to smile for appearances, to pretend like everything was okay. It wasn't okay. And for the first time, that was allowed to exist in the open. I kept working. The business started gaining traction, word of mouth, referrals, a few small wins that began to add up. I threw myself into it like a woman possessed, not because I needed the distraction, but because I needed proof that I could build something from the ashes. Something that belonged only to me. I started seeing my worth not in comparison to what was taken from me, but in the strength of what I was creating in its place. Still, the shadows crept in sometimes. Random songs, smells, commercials, tiny, ridiculous things would hit me like a freight train. I'd be walking through Target and suddenly hear our song playing overhead. Or I'd find an old sweater of his tucked away in a box I'd missed, and the scent would flood my brain like poison. But I learned to breathe through it, to let the waves crash and then recede without drowning in them. Leah disappeared from my world completely. No social media, no mutual friends. Gone. And honestly, I was grateful. I didn't need closure. I didn't want a redemption arc. Some people didn't deserve a second chance, and she was one of them. The absence of her was the clearest peace I'd felt in years. It was like a tumor had been removed, not without pain, but with deep, lasting relief. Derek, on the other hand, lingered like a ghost. I'd hear from mutual acquaintances about how he was spiraling. Drinking too much. Missing work. Rumors of him trying to reconnect with Leah and failing. There was a petty part of me, one I won't deny, that found satisfaction in that. But another part, the healed part, just pitted him. He destroyed something beautiful, and all he had left were the ruins he built with his own hands. One afternoon, I was volunteering at a local women's center, something new I'd taken on to give back to women dealing with similar betrayal, when a young woman asked me, "How do you trust again?" I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because her eyes looked so much like mine did months ago, tired, scared, searching for something to hold onto. I told her, "You don't start by trusting someone else. You start by trusting you. That your instincts matter. That your pain has a voice. That your worth doesn't depend on who stays or leaves." She cried. I did too. And for the first time, it wasn't from grief. It was from grace. Because I realized in that moment I hadn't just survived Derek and Leah. I'd survived myself. The old version, the people-pleaser, the self-sacrificer, the woman who put everyone else's needs above her own, she was gone. And in her place was someone entirely new. It was a Tuesday morning when I saw her, the woman I had become. I was brushing my teeth, hair pulled up, still wearing the oversized t-shirt I'd slept in, when I looked into the mirror and really saw myself for the first time in what felt like forever. No makeup. No performance. Just me. And instead of the usual reflexive scan for flaws, dark circles, a new crease, the small scar on my chin, I saw something else. I saw clarity. A strength in my eyes that hadn't been there before. Not the manufactured kind you post on Instagram. Real, quiet, unshakable strength. The kind born from fire. I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror at first because I had never given myself permission to become her. I was always somebody's wife, somebody's best friend, somebody's reliable support system. My identity was a reflection of the roles I played, the comfort I provided, the love I gave. But now, I wasn't anyone's anything. And for the first time, that wasn't terrifying. It was liberating. I began setting boundaries I once thought were too harsh. I learned how to say no without apologizing. I chose silence over explanations and peace over proving my point. My phone was filled with fewer people, but the conversations ran deeper. I no longer surrounded myself with those who smiled through their teeth or offered love with conditions. I began reclaiming my own time, energy, and space. And it was glorious. I started doing things I'd forgotten I loved. Walking alone at dawn when the city was still asleep. Cooking elaborate meals just for myself. Painting. Badly but joyfully. I bought new sheets. I repainted my bedroom. I changed the locks. I hung up a small framed quote by the front door that said, if they wanted to, they would. It reminded me every day, no more settling for half-love or half-truths. One night, I even found myself laughing. Loudly. Freely. Mark had come by to drop off some documents. He was still untangling some shared accounts he and Leah had together, and we ended up talking for hours again. Not about them. About books. Music. What we would have done differently in our 20s if we knew what we knew now. At one point, I snorted mid-laugh, completely unguarded. He looked at me and said, "That sound? That's freedom." I blushed. And then I laughed even harder. There were no fireworks between us. No grand romance. Just two people helping each other put the pieces back together without pressure or expectation. That was enough. More than enough. And then came the phone call. Late one night. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something, maybe instinct, maybe fate, made me answer. "Is this Emily?" the voice asked. Female. Shaky. "Yes," I said cautiously. I think I'm Derek's ex. From before you two got married." And I think we need to talk. I stood there in silence, heart pounding, every nerve on edge. Because somehow I knew. This wasn't over yet. There was still one more truth left to uncover. Her name was Vanessa. And the moment I heard it, something clicked in the back of my mind. I remembered it vaguely, like a shadow someone Derek had mentioned years ago in passing, with a shrug and a smirk, calling her the crazy one. I'd never asked for details, assuming it was one of those college flings that ended badly. I trusted him. God, I trusted him. But now she was on the phone, her voice shaking with something too deep to be fear and too old to be fresh. Something that had lived inside her for years, unspoken, festering. I saw your name on the divorce filing, she said quietly. And I almost didn't reach out. I told myself it was none of my business. But when I saw the story going around about the affair, the video, you don't know me, but I know him. And I couldn't stay quiet anymore. We agreed to meet the next day. A public place again. Always neutral ground now. I wasn't about to walk blind into any more emotional landmines. We sat across from each other at a small cafe near the park. She looked nothing like I expected. Not fragile. Not angry. She looked tired. Like someone who'd been holding something too heavy for far too long. She pulled a small envelope from her bag and set it on the table. I need you to see this before I say anything, she said. Inside were photos. Old ones. Her and Derek. Smiling. Younger, thinner, different hair, but unmistakably the same man. One photo in particular made my stomach drop, Derek with his hand on her belly, both of them grinning like they just won the lottery. She saw my face and nodded. Yes, she said softly. I was pregnant. I sat still, cold creeping up my spine. What happened? I lost it, she whispered. 7 months in. Complications. It destroyed me. I didn't leave the apartment for weeks. He stayed at first. Then he stopped coming home. One day I got a letter from a lawyer, his lawyer. He'd filed for separation. Just walked out. No warning. No goodbye. Said he couldn't handle the grief anymore. I covered my mouth, trying to breathe. That's when I started realizing the pattern, she continued. He always runs. Always blames. Always paints the woman as unstable so no one questions him. I tried to warn someone else once, his next girlfriend, but she blocked me. Said I was jealous. After that, I just gave up. I was silent. I felt like I was staring at my own reflection from another life. Same pain. Different time. I guess I just needed to know I wasn't the only one, she said. You weren't, I whispered. She reached across the table, gently placing her hand on mine. He doesn't change, Emily. He just hides better. We sat like that for a long time. Two women bound by the same betrayal, the same man, the same lies. And in that moment, I understood something deeper than anger or heartbreak. Derek hadn't just hurt me. He'd broken people. And still walked away clean every time. But not anymore. Because now he had a trail of truth behind him. And one woman strong enough to expose it. After Vanessa left, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, engine off, phone untouched, eyes locked on nothing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. That was the worst part. It didn't shock me that Derek had left her in the middle of a storm. It didn't shock me that he'd painted her as unstable, just like he'd subtly painted me when I started asking too many questions near the end. What shocked me was how familiar it all felt. Like her story was just a different version of my own. Same script. Same manipulation. Same vanishing act. I thought about the women I'd met through my support group. The stories they told. How many of us had been told we were too emotional, too needy, too much? How many had been gaslit into believing our instincts were lies and our pain was exaggerated? I started wondering how many others were out there. Women who had loved him, trusted him, believed in the fantasy he sold so effortlessly. And suddenly I couldn't sit still anymore. I went home, pulled out that journal I'd found in the storage unit and began reading it again, not as a heartbroken ex-wife, but as an investigator. I flipped through page after page, this time taking notes. Names he mentioned in passing. Locations. Odd little lines about getting drinks with Sam's cousin or a quick weekend in Pittsburgh with old friends. I built a list. Patterns. Dates. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I reached out to the women. Some were easy to find, tags in old photos, comments on his social media, shared connections. Others took some digital digging. But slowly they emerged from the shadows like ghosts I hadn't even known I was haunted by. One woman replied within minutes. Another said, I've been waiting for someone to ask. A third burst into tears the moment we got on the phone. All of them had stories. And every single one echoed the same cycle: charm, intensity, subtle control, emotional withdrawal, betrayal, blame, disappearance. Some had been cheated on. Others financially manipulated. One even said she'd loaned him money to help him start over after his horrible ex-wife destroyed his life. That was me. I was the villain in her version of the story. That night, I gathered it all. Testimonies, screenshots, dates, receipts. I wasn't collecting evidence for revenge anymore. I was documenting a pattern of abuse. Because Derek hadn't just broken my heart. He'd made a career out of hurting women. And no one had ever stopped him. They had all walked away, too hurt, too exhausted, too scared to fight. But I wasn't walking away this time. I was going to make sure no one else fell into the same trap again. And I knew exactly where to start. With his image. His job. And the shiny, curated mask he wore so well. It was time. I had the stories, the names, the receipts. What I was holding wasn't just a personal record of betrayal, it was a case study in emotional predation. I knew if I came at him directly, he'd spin it. That was his gift, flipping the narrative before anyone had time to think. He'd play the victim. The misunderstood man. He always did. No, I needed to be smarter. Louder. Strategic. So I started where it would hurt him most, his reputation. Derek prided himself on being a leader. A mentor. He'd been posting for years about his success in the tech world, how he empowered young professionals, especially women. He had a blog. A following. He spoke at conferences. Companies paid him to talk about ethics. It made me sick to my stomach. I contacted 2 of the organizations that had previously hosted his speaking events. I didn't accuse. I just shared the truth, documents, messages, dates. I framed it carefully. I thought you should be aware of this individual's behavior before endorsing him further. I didn't demand action. I just let the weight of his own words and mine speak for themselves. Then I posted on my own platforms. Nothing sensational. No rage. Just a thread. Some stories take time to reveal their full truth. I was married to a man who made a habit out of harming women behind closed doors. Here's what I've learned and what I'll never stay silent about again. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, I had messages from women I'd never met sharing similar stories. Derek's name was passed from inbox to inbox like a warning flare. A few women from his current network, people I didn't even know, thanked me. I always felt something was off. Thank you for confirming I wasn't crazy. By the end of the week, 2 companies quietly removed him from upcoming events. One issued a bland, "We take all concerns seriously" statement. Another asked to speak with me privately. But it wasn't about destroying his life. It was about ending the illusion. I didn't name him in my thread. I didn't need to. Those who knew him, knew. And more importantly, those who might have known him in the future, they think twice now. I expected backlash. Maybe even threats. But it never came. Because deep down, I think even Derek knew he'd run out of road. The mask had cracked and there was no fixing it. What surprised me most was how light I felt. Not triumphant. Not vindictive. Just free. Free from the need to explain. Free from the weight of silence. Free from being the woman who let it all slide because she was too scared to start over. I wasn't her anymore. I was something entirely new. And life? Life was finally starting to look like mine again. But as I began to settle into this new world, something else knocked on my door. Not a person this time. An opportunity. And with it, a question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. The opportunity came wrapped in an email that, at first glance, looked like spam. The subject line read, "We read your story. Would you speak with us?" It was from a producer at a podcast, one of those big-name ones that tackled real-life stories, social justice, deep dives into people who had endured something unthinkable and came out the other side changed. I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes, unsure if I was ready to turn my trauma into something public again. I had just regained control of my life. Did I really want to put myself and my past back under a spotlight? But the producer's words stuck with me. She'd read the thread. Heard from some of the other women. She believed what I had lived through wasn't just personal, it was a pattern, and patterns needed to be seen. Heard. Understood. Stories like yours help other women realize they're not alone, she wrote. And that they don't have to keep quiet to be safe. I said yes. Not because I wanted attention. Not for revenge. But because somewhere out there, I knew another woman was sitting in her car, staring at a mirror, wondering how she let it happen. Wondering if she was crazy. If she was too sensitive. If maybe it was her fault. I had been her. And now I had a chance to reach her. The recording took place 2 weeks later. I was nervous as hell. I wore my favorite black blouse, the one I'd bought on a whim after the divorce, a silent promise to myself that I'd never again shrink to make someone else comfortable. The host was gentle, warm, and careful with her questions. We didn't name Derek. That wasn't the point. We talked about the signs. The gaslighting. The way abusers don't always hit, they just chip away at you until you're too hollow to see the difference between love and survival. We talked about Leah. About betrayal that cuts deepest when it comes from someone who knew your whole story. I shared how long it took to forgive myself. How betrayal doesn't just steal your trust in others, it steals your trust in you. When it was over, I felt like I'd run a marathon barefoot across broken glass. But I also felt something else, release. As if every word I'd carried in silence had finally been set down, piece by piece, no longer a weight pressing on my ribs. The episode aired 3 weeks later. I thought I'd be flooded with shame or regret. Instead, my inbox filled with voices. Some whispering their stories. Others screaming for the first time. Many had never told anyone. Some were still in the middle of it. Some had been out for years but had never healed. They thanked me. Not because I was brave, but because I said what they couldn't. And somewhere in the middle of that flood, I realized something. I wasn't just healing. I was becoming whole. Not despite what I'd lived through, but because of what I was choosing to do with it. And that choice would open a door I never imagined walking through again. A door with Mark standing quietly on the other side. It had been months since Mark and I last truly talked. Life had moved forward in separate directions, both of us focused on our own healing, our own growth. We'd exchanged the occasional check-in, an article sent, a quick thinking of you on hard days, but that was it. And honestly, I was grateful for the space. I didn't need a new relationship to validate my recovery. I needed stillness. Independence. But sometimes when I was folding laundry or sitting at red lights, I'd think of him. His steady presence. His kind eyes. The way he never asked me to be anything other than exactly what I was in the moment. So when he showed up that afternoon after the podcast aired, after my inbox became a floodgate of stories and grief, I didn't feel fear or panic. I felt readiness. He didn't knock right away. I saw his silhouette through the glass of my front door, just standing there, as if gathering himself. When he finally did knock, it was soft. No pressure. No demand. When I opened the door, he was holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Nothing fancy. Not the kind you buy in a rush to impress someone. The kind that looked like they were chosen because they meant something. Hope. Healing. Newness. I listened, he said quietly. I nodded. He didn't have to say what. I knew. The podcast. My voice laid bare for the world. My pain, my shame, my journey. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. And if it's not too late, I'd like to try. Not to fix you. Not to save you. Just to stand next to you. Wherever this leads. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Because those words, to stand next to you, were exactly what I'd never had with Derek. I'd been dragged behind him or left to lead when he didn't care enough. But never beside. Never as equals. I stepped back and let him in. Not into my home. Into my life. We didn't start over with grand declarations or whirlwind romance. We started with dinner. With a walk around the neighborhood. With conversations that didn't revolve around the past but honored it nonetheless. He told me about the therapy he'd started. About how much he'd blamed himself for what Leah had done. How ashamed he felt for not seeing it sooner. We were two people who had been gutted by the same knife but learned to stitch the wound differently. There was no perfection between us. Just honesty. And God, that was enough. More than enough. One night, weeks later, we sat on my porch watching the sky shift from orange to navy. He looked at me and said, "Do you think it's possible to love again, fully?" I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't want to speak from hope alone. I wanted to speak from truth. I don't know, I said. But I think it's possible to try. And maybe that's where love starts anyway, not in the certainty but in the willingness. He smiled. And we sat in that silence, comfortable, whole, and real. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of a new chapter. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was excited to turn the page. There's a silence that comes after a storm, not empty but earned. A stillness that feels like breath after drowning, like stepping into sunlight after months underground. That's what life felt like now. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just calm. And in that calm, I started rediscovering the woman I'd forgotten for so long. Not the version curated to keep a marriage alive, or to protect a friendship that was slowly poisoning me. Me unfiltered. Messy. Honest. Alive. I began to travel again, nothing big, just weekend road trips. Places I'd once wanted to go with Derek but never did because he was too busy or not interested. I went to Asheville. To a quiet lake in Vermont. To the Pacific Northwest where I hiked alone through trails soaked in fog and pine. I took photos, wrote journal entries, let myself be alone without being lonely. There was something beautiful about it, answering only to myself, setting my own pace. I didn't need permission. I didn't need someone else's enthusiasm to validate my choices. For the first time, solitude wasn't a punishment. It was a reward. Mark and I continued to grow slowly. No pressure to define what we were. No need to announce it to the world. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about us. About the gentle way he remembered how I liked my coffee, or the way we sat side by side reading on quiet nights, feet touching, saying nothing. He never asked for more than I could give. And I never felt like I had to perform to earn his care. It was just there. Present. Steady. Safe. The women from the support group remained in my life too. We started a project, an online community, a safe haven for people who had experienced betrayal and emotional manipulation. We called it the Glass House. A place where no one had to pretend, where no one's pain was minimized or dismissed. We wrote essays, shared resources, hosted weekly video chats. What began as a way to cope had turned into something bigger, a movement, a purpose. One evening, while organizing testimonials for the site, I found myself rereading mine. The original one. The one I wrote just weeks after the affair. It was raw, disjointed, full of anguish and confusion. I barely recognized the woman who'd written it. And yet I honored her. Because she fought through the storm when she didn't think she could. She screamed when others told her to stay quiet. She walked away when staying would have been easier. I wanted to hug her. To whisper, "You made it." Because I had. I wasn't healed completely. Some wounds don't close with neat stitches. But I was whole enough to laugh again. To trust. To rest. And that, more than anything, felt like justice. Not the kind you see in movies. The quiet kind. The kind where you no longer carry their shame on your back. The kind where you win simply by choosing yourself. But the past wasn't finished with me yet. Because closure has a funny way of knocking, right when you least expect it. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day that makes you nostalgic for no reason, where the sky feels heavy and everything moves slower. I was folding laundry, the smell of lavender still warm in the room, when I heard it. A knock. Not hurried, not aggressive. Just steady. Purposeful. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't in the mood for anyone. But I opened the door anyway. And there he was. Derek. Older, somehow. Smaller. Like the weight of everything he'd lost had finally begun to settle on his shoulders. He stood in the drizzle, his once perfectly manicured appearance now worn and tired. A man unraveled not by tragedy but by truth catching up. For a moment we just stared at each other. My heart didn't race. My knees didn't shake. The fear, the fury, the grief, I had let them go long ago. All I felt was a quiet, rooted calm. "Emily," he said, voice low, like he wasn't sure if he had the right to say it. I didn't respond. I just waited. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve your time and I'm not here to ask for anything. I've been thinking. About everything. And I realized I never really saw you for who you were. I only saw what you gave me. And I was too selfish to realize what that cost you. I let the silence sit. I wasn't going to fill the gaps for him anymore. Let him do the work. He looked down. I lost my job. I've been in therapy. I've reached out to a few people I hurt. Not because I want forgiveness. Just because I needed to stop pretending like I hadn't done what I did. I still didn't speak. I watched the rain beat on his jacket. The man who had once controlled the temperature of my entire world now stood outside it, wet and waiting. "I just wanted you to know," he said at last, "that you were never the problem. And that I see it now. Too late, I know. But still. I see it." I nodded. Not in forgiveness. Not in acceptance. Just acknowledgement. "You don't need to say anything," he added and turned to go. But before he could walk away, I finally spoke. "I hope you keep doing the work." He stopped. Looked back. "Because I did mine," I said. "And I'm finally free of you." He blinked, then gave a slow, almost grateful nod. And then he left. Just like that. No dramatics. No begging. Just the echo of a man who once held my whole heart, now reduced to a memory standing on my doorstep. I closed the door behind him. Locked it. Breathed in. And smiled. Not because I was happy he came, but because his presence didn't undo me. That was the power I had fought so hard to reclaim. And I had it now. For good. But there was still one final truth I needed to face. Not about him. Not about Leah. About me. About the future I finally had the power to choose. In the months that followed, life didn't explode into magic or fairy tale resolutions. There were no perfect endings, no sudden fireworks. Just quiet, consistent peace, the kind you don't notice at first because it's not loud, but slowly, gently, it begins to wrap itself around you like a second skin. I'd spent so long reacting to chaos, to lies, to other people's decisions that learning how to just live on my own terms was a whole new rhythm. But I learned. Every day I chose something small for myself. A morning without my phone. A meal eaten slowly. A conversation that fed my soul. These weren't acts of defiance. They were acts of self-devotion. I went back to the beach where Derek once promised me forever. This time I went alone. I walked barefoot along the shoreline, the wind tugging at my sweater, the sky wide and limitless above me. I carried no bitterness in my chest. Only the weight of my own resilience. I let the waves rush over my feet and thought of everything I had survived, every night I didn't think I'd make it, every lie I untangled, every piece of myself I stitched back together with trembling hands. I stood there for a long time, letting the tide pull away from me everything I was finally ready to release. And when I turned to leave, I didn't look back. Mark was still in my life. Not as a savior. Not as a conclusion. But as a presence. Steady. Respectful. We were building something together, but slowly. Carefully. I told him from the start, I wouldn't be someone's crutch again. And he didn't want that. What we had was built on truth, on shared wounds and mutual growth. Whether it would last forever didn't matter. What mattered was that it was real. The women at the glass house continued to expand the space we had created. Our platform grew. We were being invited to speak at conferences, to publish essays, to help train therapists on how emotional abuse often hides in plain sight. It felt surreal. That something born from pain could turn into purpose. But maybe that's what healing really is, not erasing the scars, but transforming them into maps. Markers of where we've been and how far we've come. Sometimes I still think of Leah. Not with hatred. Just with distance. She lives in a different world now, one where I no longer belong. I hope she's facing herself. I hope she's growing. But that's no longer my story to follow. She lost the right to hold any part of my heart the moment she broke it without hesitation. And Derek? He remains a cautionary tale I carry quietly. A chapter closed. Because my story? It's mine now. I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become in the aftermath. I chose to live. To rebuild. To trust again, first myself, then others. And in doing so, I found something stronger than revenge, louder than pain, deeper than love. I found me. That's the real ending. And the most powerful beginning.